5 years ago, I didn't fall in love with a woman, I built one. I found Sarah in a village with no light, no future and no plan. I paid for everything, her education, her clothes, her car, the life she now walked through like she had always owned it. I put a master's degree on her wall and designer labels on her back, and I told myself that was love. I was wrong. Hello everyone, welcome to our story. Before we continue, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Also, tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Are you in New York, Jamaica, maybe South Africa or Canada? When the doctor told me I had weeks to live, kidney failure, stage 4, no time to waste, I turned to the woman I had given everything to. I told her she was a match. I told her I needed her. She was at the mirror when I said it. She didn't turn around. She told me I had worked myself into the ground, and that was not her problem. She told me the 5 years she spent, as my wife was payment enough for any sacrifice I ever made. And then, and this is the part I will never forget for as long as I live, she told me to call my agging parents. Said the people who brought me into this world should be the ones to keep me in it. Then she picked up her clutch, walked out the door and went to her gala. She left me there to die. What Sarah did not know, what nobody in that hospital knew, was that my kidneys were perfectly fine. I had planned the whole thing. The fake diagnosis, the doctor, the paperwork, all of it. Because after 5 years of giving that woman everything I had, I needed to know one thing. I needed to know who she really was. Now I had my answer. My kidneys were fine, but my marriage was already dead. Let me take you back to where this story really begins. 5 years before that hospital room, before the designer clothes and the master's degree and the cold eyes in the mirror, there was a girl standing at the side of a road in a village that time had forgotten. I was driving back from a site inspection, one of my construction projects, 3 hours outside the city, when I saw her. She was carrying a bucket of water on her head and a rejection letter in her hand. I could see it from the car, that bright red stamp across the top. University admission. Denied. She wasn't crying. That was the thing that made me stop. Most people would have been crying. She was just standing there staring at the letter like she was memorizing it. Like she was deciding something. I pulled over. Her name was Sarah. She was 25 years old, the eldest of 6 children, and she had been working to save her own school fees for 3 years. 3 years of carrying water, selling groundnuts, doing other people's laundry, and the money was still never enough. The rejection letter was not even about her grades. Her grades were fine. It was a funding issue, she simply could not pay. I don't know what came over me that afternoon. Maybe it was the way she held that letter without flinching. Maybe it was something in her eyes that looked like hunger, not for food, but for something more. A life. A chance. Whatever it was, I made a decision in less than 5 minutes that would define the next 5 years of my existence. I told her I would pay for everything. She looked at me like I was joking. I gave her my business card. I told her to have her father call me. 3 days later, her father called. I paid her first year tuition before the month was out. Then the second year. Then the third. I moved her to the city, set her up in a decent apartment, made sure she had everything she needed to focus on nothing but her studies. When she graduated her first degree and told me she wanted to go further to get her master's, I didn't hesitate. I wrote the check the same afternoon she asked. Somewhere in the middle of all of that, I fell in love with her. Or maybe I fell in love with the idea of her, the girl from the village who refused to cry at the side of the road. Maybe I thought that the woman I was building would carry some of that girl inside her forever. I was wrong about that too. Because the woman Sarah forgot every single thing about that road, about that bucket, about that letter. She forgot where she came from. And eventually she forgot what she owed. The day Sarah collected her master's degree, I was the proudest man in that hall. I sat in the front row in my best suit, watching her walk across that stage, and I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Completion. Like a project I had poured everything into had finally come together exactly the way I envisioned it. The cameras were flashing. Her gown was perfect. She looked like she had been born for that moment. I had planned a dinner for that evening. Private restaurant, her favorite food, a bracelet I had picked out myself. I wanted to celebrate her. I wanted her to know that everything she had worked for, everything I had invested in, had been worth it. She called me before I even left the hall. Not to say thank you. Not to tell me she was happy, or that she couldn't have done it without me, or any of the things I had quietly been hoping to hear for 5 years. She called me to tell me she had seen a car. A Mercedes, brand new, top of the range, 20 million naira. She said she deserved it. She said a woman with a master's degree could not be seen driving her old car. She said it would embarrass her at the kind of jobs she was now qualified to apply for. She had clearly been thinking about it for a while, because she had the colour picked out and the dealership address ready before I could say a single word. I stood outside that graduation hall in my best suit, holding the bracelet I had bought her, and I felt something shift inside my chest. I told her we would talk about it at dinner. She said there was nothing to talk about. She said she was not asking for something unreasonable. She said, and I remember this clearly because it was the first time I truly heard who she had become, she said, "David, everything you have is because of your connections and your luck. The least you can do is make sure your wife looks the part." I bought her the car. I don't know why. Pride, maybe. Or the part of me that still saw the girl at the side of the road and wanted to believe she was still in there somewhere. I signed the papers, handed over the keys, and watched her drive away from the dealership without looking back. That night at dinner, she talked about the car for 40 minutes. She talked about where she would park it, what her friends would say, how she needed a new wardrobe to match it. She did not say thank you once. Not for the car, not for the degree, not for any of it. I sat across the table from her, smiling when I was supposed to smile, and underneath that smile a question was forming that I could not push away. Who exactly had I built? I didn't make the decision overnight. For weeks after that dinner, I carried the question with me everywhere I went. Into boardrooms, onto construction sites, into the silence of our bedroom at night where Sarah slept with her back to me and her new designer handbag on the chair like a trophy she needed to keep in sight. I watched her. I paid attention in a way I hadn't allowed myself to before. And the more I watched, the more I saw things I had been too in love or too proud to notice. The way she spoke to my mother on the phone, polite enough to pass but thin, like a performance she had rehearsed but couldn't quite be bothered to deliver convincingly. The way she never asked about my work unless it involved money coming in. The way she had stopped pretending to be interested in anything about my life that didn't directly benefit hers. I started asking myself a question that frightened me. If I lost everything tomorrow, not some of it, all of it, would she still be sitting across that dinner table? I already knew the answer, I just needed proof. That was when I called Dr. Emmanuel. He was an old friend, a private physician I had known for 15 years, a man who understood discretion the way most people understand breathing naturally, without effort. I met him at his clinic on a Tuesday evening after hours when the building was empty and the receptionist had gone home. I told him what I needed. He was quiet for a long time, then he asked me if I was sure. I told him I had never been more sure of anything. He drew up the papers over 3 days. Official letterhead, laboratory results, radiology reports, the kind of documentation that could convince anyone who wasn't a specialist. Stage 4 kidney failure, rapid deterioration, transplant required within weeks or the prognosis would become terminal. Everything stamped, signed and dated correctly. It was flawless. I read through every page the night he handed them to me, sitting alone in my study with the door locked. I looked at my own name on a death sentence I had written for myself, and I felt something strange settle over me. Not fear, not guilt, something colder than both. Clarity. I had spent 5 years giving a woman everything I had. My money, my time, my belief in her, my name. I had pulled her from a road in a village and handed her a life most people only dream about. And somewhere between that road and this moment, she had taken everything I offered and given me nothing back but performance. I deserved to know the truth. I put the papers in my briefcase, turned off the study light and walked upstairs to bed. The test was ready. Now it was time to see exactly what kind of woman I had married. I revealed the diagnosis on a Thursday evening. I sat Sarah down in the living room, placed the papers on the table between us, and watched her face as she read through them. I had rehearsed the moment 100 times in my head. I had imagined tears. I had imagined her reaching across the table and taking my hand. I had imagined fear, at the very least the kind of fear that strips a person down to who they really are underneath everything else. What I got was silence. Not the silence of someone too devastated to speak, a calculating silence, the kind that has numbers running behind it. She read the papers twice, set them down carefully, and looked at me with those eyes I had spent 5 years trying to warm. She said she was sorry to hear that. Not I am here for you, not we will figure this out together. She was sorry to hear that, the way you are sorry to hear that a meeting has been rescheduled. I told her the medical bills were going to be significant, that I was restructuring my accounts to cover the treatments, that for the next few months things would need to slow down, no unnecessary spending, no new purchases. That was the moment the mask began to slip. It didn't fall off all at once. It happened gradually, the way a fine coat of paint peels in the rain, slowly at first, then in large, ugly strips that expose everything underneath. The woman who had once smiled carefully and chosen her words around me began to stop bothering. Small things at first, a sharpness in her voice when I reminded her about the budget, an irritation she no longer tried to hide when I declined to approve a shopping trip. A coldness at the dinner table that had moved beyond distant into something that felt almost like contempt. She started spending more time on her phone. More evenings out with friends whose names I had never heard before. She would come home late, say little, and move through the house like I was furniture she had grown tired of arranging around. One evening I walked into the bedroom and found her going through my filing cabinet. She said she was looking for a document. I asked her which one. She couldn't answer. I stood in the doorway and watched her close the drawer slowly, and I kept my face completely still, even as something cold moved through my stomach. She was not looking for a document, she was taking inventory. I had married a woman who, the moment the money showed the first sign of stopping, stopped seeing a husband and started seeing an asset she needed to evaluate before it depreciated any further. I went back downstairs, I sat in my study, and I thought about the girl with the rejection letter standing at the side of the road. She was gone. She had been gone for a long time. 2 weeks into the diagnosis, I began to disappear. Not literally, but I made myself smaller. I moved through the house slowly, spoke less, ate carefully, performed the quiet deterioration of a man whose body was surrendering. I wanted her to see it every day. I wanted it impossible to ignore. She ignored it anyway. The first Friday night, she brought 4 friends home. I heard them from the bedroom, laughter, music, the clink of glasses, the kind of noise that fills a house and makes it feel alive. I lay in the bed with the lights low and listened to my wife entertain guests 10 meters from where her husband was supposedly dying. Nobody knocked on the door to check on me. Not once. Around midnight I got up quietly and stood in the hallway. I could see them through the gap in the sitting room door. Sarah was in a dress I had not seen before, red, expensive, the kind of thing you buy when you are celebrating something. She was laughing loudly, freely, in a way she had not laughed around me in years. There was champagne on the table. There were flowers I had not bought. I stood in that hallway in my robe and watched my wife have the time of her life. Then one of her friends said something I couldn't quite hear, and Sarah glanced toward the hallway and said, loud enough to carry, loud enough, I believe, for her to know there was a chance I would hear it. She said, "Don't worry about him. He's in there being dramatic. Some men get sick and completely lose themselves. It's exhausting, honestly." The room laughed. I stepped back into the darkness of the hallway and stood very still. Exhausting, that was the word she used. Not heartbreaking, not devastating, not frightening. Her husband was dying in the next room and the word she reached for was exhausting. I went back to bed. I lay on my back and stared at the ceiling while the music played and the laughter continued, and the champagne was poured, and I did something I had not done since I was a young man with nothing to his name. I counted the cost. Not in money, in years, in choices, in the 1,000 small moments where I had seen a sign and looked away from it because I wanted so badly for the woman I had built to be real, to be grateful, to be capable of love that wasn't transactional. The party went on until 2 in the morning. When Sarah finally came to bed, she didn't check on me. She didn't whisper my name in the dark. She took off her jewelry, set it on the dresser, and was asleep in minutes. I lay beside her in the dark, wide awake. And I thought to myself, whatever is left of this marriage, she just buried it tonight. I chose a Sunday morning. No distractions, no friends coming over, no gala to rush to. Just the 2 of us in the house, the kind of quiet that makes it impossible to perform, and a conversation I had been building toward since the moment I placed those papers on the table. I had set up the camera 3 days earlier. Small, discreet, fitted into the bookshelf in the living room between 2 novels she had never once opened. It had a clear line of sight to the sofa where I asked her to sit. I had tested the angle myself, checked the recording twice. Whatever happened in that room in the next hour, it would exist forever. I sat across from her, and I told her the doctors had confirmed it. I needed a transplant, soon. Without it, the timeline they had given me would shorten dramatically. I told her the hospital had run the compatibility tests and that she was the closest match available. I told her that I was not asking her as a patient asking a donor. I was asking her as a husband asking his wife. I watched her face the entire time I spoke. She waited until I finished. Then she uncrossed her legs, leaned back into the sofa, and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on another human being in my life. It was not sadness. It was not conflict. It was not even the cold blankness I had grown used to. It was annoyance. Like I had asked her to reschedule something important. She said, "David, do you understand what a kidney donation does to a person's body? Do you understand the recovery time, the scarring, the restrictions afterward? You're asking me to permanently alter my body." I said, "I'm asking you to save my life." She said, "You're asking me to ruin mine." I let the silence sit between us. Then I asked her quietly, if not her, then who? She didn't hesitate. She said, "Your parents brought you into this world. That's their responsibility, not mine. Let them donate. They're old anyway. What do they need 2 kidneys for at their age?" I heard the words. I let them land fully before I responded. I said, "They are in their 70s, Sarah." She shrugged, an actual shrug, like we were discussing whose turn it was to take out the rubbish. Then she stood up, smoothed her dress, and said, "I didn't sign up to be your medical plan, David. I'm your wife, not your donor. Get a transplant list, get a stranger, get whatever you need. But don't sit in front of me and make me feel guilty for wanting to keep my own body intact." She walked out of the room. I sat alone in the silence for a long time. Then I looked at the bookshelf. The camera was still recording. I should have slept easier that night, knowing the camera had everything I needed. I didn't. Something was still unresolved. A feeling I couldn't name, sitting low in my chest like a stone that hadn't finished sinking. I had the proof of her coldness. I had her words recorded in her own voice. But coldness alone felt like the surface of something deeper, and I had not survived 15 years in business by ignoring that feeling. I was right to listen to it. 3 days after the kidney conversation, I woke at 2:30 in the morning to an empty bed. I lay still for a moment, listening. The house was quiet but not silent. There was a voice somewhere beneath me. Low, careful, the particular tone of someone who does not want to be heard. Sarah was in the study. I moved to the top of the stairs without turning on any lights, and I stood there in the dark the way I had stood in the hallway during her party, still, invisible, listening. She was on the phone. I could not hear every word, but I have spent my entire career in rooms where fortunes were decided, and I have learned to catch the words that matter even through walls and distance. And the words I caught in the next 4 minutes rearranged everything I thought I already knew. She was talking to a lawyer. Not a friend, not a family member. A lawyer. I could tell from the way she spoke, precise, transactional, without the warmth she performed for people she needed something from socially. This was business. She was conducting business at 2:30 in the morning while her husband lay dying upstairs. I heard her say his name, the lawyer's name I assumed, then I heard her say the word documents. Then estate, then a phrase that turned the air in my lungs to concrete. Widow's inheritance. She was asking about widow's inheritance. I gripped the banister at the top of the stairs and I stood absolutely motionless. She continued talking, her voice never rising above that careful, controlled murmur. She asked about timelines. She asked about what would be required. She asked, and this is the part that will stay with me until my last real breath on this earth, she asked whether the process could begin before the death was officially registered, to save time afterward. To save time afterward. My wife was not waiting to see if I would survive. She was not praying for a miracle or searching for another donor or sitting up at night consumed by grief. She was managing logistics. She was streamlining the process of inheriting everything I had built so that not a single day would be wasted once I was gone. I walked back to the bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. And I understood finally, completely, and without any remaining doubt, exactly what I was dealing with. This was never a marriage. It was a long game, and she had been playing it from the beginning. She left that Saturday morning with a small smile I was not supposed to notice. I watched from the bedroom window as she got into the Mercedes, my Mercedes, the one I had bought with my own money on the day her gratitude died, and pulled out of the driveway without looking back at the house. Not once. She had told me she was going shopping with a friend. A general, unconvincing kind of shopping. The sort of errand you describe vaguely when the details would reveal too much. Dr. Emmanuel had already called to confirm everything was in place. The lawyer I had been quietly working with for the past week had the documents prepared. My personal security team was stationed discreetly outside. Everything I needed was ready and waiting in the living room of the house I had built from nothing, the house I had brought her into, the house she had already begun mentally redistributing to herself. I showered, I shaved, I put on my best suit. Then I sat in the living room and I waited. She came back 2 hours later carrying 3 shopping bags. I heard the key in the lock, heard her heels on the tiled entrance, heard the particular rhythm of a woman moving through a home she has already decided belongs to her. She was humming something softly to herself. She sounded lighter than she had in months. She walked through the door into the living room and stopped. I was standing in the center of the room. No hospital gown, no pallor, no weakness in my posture or exhaustion in my eyes. I was standing the way I had always stood before the diagnosis, straight, composed, dressed like the man who had built everything around her from the ground up. The shopping bags slipped in her grip. I watched the sequence move across her face in real time. Confusion first, then a rapid, desperate attempt at recalculation, then something that was not quite fear but lived in the same neighborhood, the expression of someone who has been caught mid-sentence in a lie they cannot unsay. She said my name like a question. I said nothing. She said I looked, she searched for the word better. I told her I had never been sick. I told her there was no kidney failure, no deteriorating timeline, no transplant list. I told her the papers were constructed, the doctor was a trusted friend, and every single moment of the past weeks had been a test that she had failed so completely and so consistently that the results required no interpretation. I told her I had the refusal on camera. I told her I had the phone call with the lawyer. I told her I had everything. She set the shopping bags down slowly on the floor. Later, when I looked inside them, I found 3 dresses. Black, all 3 of them black. She had not been shopping with a friend. She had been shopping for my funeral. She tried everything. Tears first, the kind that arrive too quickly and too conveniently, the performance of a woman who has spent years learning which gestures move people and deploying them without shame. She told me she loved me. She told me she had panicked, that fear had made her irrational, that the things she said and did during those weeks were not a true reflection of who she was. I stood in the center of that room, and I listened to every word without moving. Then I told her the truth. I told her that the test was fake, but her heartlessness was real. I told her that no amount of fear or panic teaches a woman to shop for funeral clothes while her husband is still breathing. No amount of confusion makes a person call a lawyer about widow's inheritance before the body is cold. No temporary irrationality produces the kind of contempt I had watched move across her face in that living room when I asked her to save my life. I told her I had not tested her character. I had simply finally allowed myself to see it. She stopped crying. My lawyer stepped forward and placed the divorce papers on the table between us. I had prepared a second document beside it, an itemized record. Every tuition payment from the first year to the master's degree. Every car, every piece of jewelry, every designer label, every bill I had covered across 5 years of a marriage that had only ever been real on one side. I did not prepare it to be cruel. I prepared it because I needed her to stand in that room and understand, with full clarity and no room for revision, exactly what she was walking away from. I told her she could keep the degree. That was hers. She had earned it in the classroom even if she had traded away everything else that mattered. But the life, the cars, the clothes, the jewelry, the apartment she had been using as a personal wardrobe, the life was mine. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she looked around the room the way a person looks at something they are seeing for the last time. The furniture, the art on the walls, the home I had built piece by piece before she ever walked through the door. My security brought a bag from upstairs and set it at her feet. It was small, worn, the kind of bag that had seen hard years and difficult roads. It was the same bag she had been carrying the day I found her at the side of the road in that village. I had kept it. I don't know why. Perhaps some part of me always knew this day would come. I told her she came into my life with that bag. She would leave with it. She picked it up, she walked to the door, she didn't look back. And just like that, the project was closed.